Welcome back to the class. I'm Savita, your bio teacher. So I'm going to simplify your biology so that you can understand well and perform better in your exams. So in today's session, we are going to start with second chapter of second PUC, human reproduction. This particular topic is one of the important topic where you can get good amount of questions. So before we start the class, I want you to have your NCERT textbook right in front of you. Keep a notebook, highlight a pen, and try to take down some of the important points that we are going to discuss in today's class. So with this, let us start today's chapter, human reproduction. So before we start the topic, I'm going to explain you certain basic terms. So we'll go a little bit slow so that you understand the whole concept. So humans are sexually reproducing, and you have a word which is known as viviparous. Now let us understand the terms before we start the topic. Okay, so the word is viviparous. Now if you take the word viviparous, it's like giving birth to young ones. So giving birth to young ones, that means the young ones are developing inside the mother's body. Okay, so now before we start, let me just select the pen so that you can go ahead highlight. So viviparous. But there are other terms that we have to know. Let's see what are those terms. Oviparous. The starting letter is said to be O. Let us assume it in the form of egg. So animals which are able to lay egg, and the eggs are incubated and they are going to hatch out. See, if it is having a calcareous shell, we call the egg as cladoid. And there are other animals which lay non-cladoic eggs. For example, frogs, fishes will have jelly-like layer. But they are egg-laying, so we call them as oviparous. So expulsion of undeveloped eggs rather than the live young ones is known as oviparous. I already told you about viviparous. Taking examples of humans include mammals in it. So giving birth to live young ones which develop inside the body of the mother. Now you have a combination word which is said to be ovoviviparous. So check. Producing eggs. So the word is producing eggs that develop. The next word I'm highlighting is within the mother's body, maternal body. So the egg is present within the mother's body and hatch within or immediately after the release from the parent. Example is rattlesnake and shark. So please make a note, rattlesnake and shark is the example which I'm giving for this. So I hope you understood the three basic terms. Now with this, let us start with human reproductive system, and your textbook has a series of terms with the definition. So first we shall discuss all those particular terms. Now, I have put one rough image of what exactly happens during the act of fertilization. If you check the image, it starts with the word which is called as release of the gamete, that is the female gamete, ovum. So that process is called ovulation, where the process of fertilization is going to occur is in the fallopian tube, which we studied as ampulla. Then there is formation of zygote. The zygote undergoes series of division, which we call it as cleavage. And once it comes to the stage which is known as blastocyst, it has reached the uterine region where it gets implanted. The process in which the blastocyst gets attached to the endometrium wall of the uterus is known as implantation. Now let's see all those steps. Now, first, for the act of fertilization, gametes are required. So the formation of gametes is known as gametogenesis. In case of male individual, sperms are produced by a process which is known as spermatogenesis. In case of female, the eggs are produced by a process which is known as oogenesis. So the first step is formation of gametes. But please don't assume it is compulsory in sexual reproduction. No. Whenever we use a word sexual reproduction, we will say a sperm and ova has to fuse. Then only you will call it as sexual reproduction. So production of gametes, you will not be including that particular sentence with respect to sexual reproduction. Okay. Next sentence, transfer of sperm. So the male gametes should come in contact with female gamete. So in human reproduction, you will be coming across a word which is called insemination. So transfer of sperms which is present in the semen in the female genital tract is known as insemination. Next, fusion. So I told you, if the male and female gamete fuse in the fallopian tube, which is known as internal fertilization. Okay. So there is formation of zygote, which is said to be diploid. Next, this is followed by formation of blastocyst. But don't forget, zygote undergoes series of cleavage. It ends up with two-cell stage, then again divides, gives rise to a berry-like structure which is called as morula. During this time period, the cilias present in the oviduct is pushing this particular morula, and by the time it reaches the uterine cavity, it is in the stage which is called as blastocyst. So formation of blastocyst. Once the blastocyst reaches the uterine part, where it gets implanted to the endometrium wall, that process is known as implantation, followed with embryonic development. So next 280 days, the young one is going to develop inside the mother's womb with a connection which is called as placenta. That particular phase of time in which the baby develops is known as gestation. And finally, the process in which the child is delivered out is known as parturition. So I hope you people are clear with the terms which starts in the first page of this particular topic. Now with this, let's move on to the next concept. Now, the reproductive units. So we are talking about the sex organs. In sexually reproducing organism, it is formed from mesoderm. So I've written mesodermal in origin. So when we studied animal kingdom, we all said we are triploblastic animal. Our body has 3 germ layers, ectoderm, mesoderm and endoderm. So I'm talking about the reproductive organ which is formed from mesoderm region. So we call this reproductive organs as gonads. So gonads are the term which is used for reproductive organ. So if you see the flow chart here, I have written, in case of male, the male reproductive organ is testis, where spermatogenesis occurs in order to produce sperm, which is said to be haploid. In the same way, in the female reproductive organ, ovaries, formation of ovum occurs by a process which is known as oogenesis, and it also gives rise to an haploid egg. During the act of fertilization, a haploid sperm fuses with a haploid ovum in order to produce a diploid zygote 2N. This act is considered to be fertilization, one of the important event of sexual reproduction which leads to variation. Okay, so I hope you're clear with the terms. Now, let's start understanding what is the meaning of primary reproductive organ and secondary reproductive organ. Primary, involved in production of gametes. In case of male, it is going to be testis. In case of female, it's going to be ovary. The region where production of gametes occur, you call that particular region as primary reproductive organ. But please don't forget, the same primary reproductive organ are involved in the production of hormones. Now, all these sex hormones which is going to be secreted are steroidal hormones. In case of male, there is requirement of testosterone. In case of female, estrogen and progesterone. So these sex hormones are also produced by primary reproductive organ. Why are they required? They help in the formation, maintenance of secondary sex organs, accessory glands, and as well as sex characters. So if anyone questions you, what is the meaning of primary reproductive organ? You shall be saying that the region where gametes are produced, testis and ovaries, and also these regions are involved in production of what? Hormones. And these hormones are essential for maintenance of secondary sexual characters, accessory glands, etc. Then what is the meaning of secondary reproductive organ? So when the word secondary reproductive organ comes, remember, it includes sex organs, glands and ducts. but they are not involved in production of gametes. So do not produce gametes. Otherwise, essential for sexual reproduction. They are essential for sexual reproduction. So how they are essential? Maybe they are producing the nutrient, they are protecting, they are also helping in transportation. So I hope you understood what is meant by primary and secondary reproductive organ in general. So let's start the first part of the topic. The subunit is the male reproductive system. So in male reproductive system, one of the most common question, where is male reproductive system located? So I've highlighted pelvis region. But the so-called testis does not stay in the pelvis. It is going to descend, which you even studied in your lower classes, that is the 10th standard. Now let us understand why is it so, what happens. But before that, I just explained you the basic explanation of primary and secondary, but we shall study with respect to the male reproductive organ now. So in case of primary reproductive organ, you will come across testis. Okay, which is lying outside the abdominal cavity enclosed in a sac called as scrotum. Now, lying outside the abdominal cavity, which is very important. Reason, our internal environment is going to be constant, that we studied, which is nothing but homeostasis of the body. The temperature is around 37 degrees Celsius. But what happened here? For the production of gametes, the temperature should be much lower. By 2 to 2.5 degrees Celsius, the temperature is lower in the sac, because of which spermatogenesis occurs. Yes, in lower body condition only, the sperm production can take place. That's why the testis is actually present inside the sac. Now, in case of secondary reproductive organ, so here I am referring, testis has the primary reproductive organ, but please don't forget it is also producing the male sex hormone, which is called testosterone. Next, in case of secondary reproductive organ, check the words epididymis, vas deferens, penis. Along with that, the 3 accessory sex glands. Now, which are the 3 accessory glands? Seminal vesicle, prostate, bulbourethral gland, which is also known as Cowper's gland. So I hope you understood what is meant by primary reproductive organ, referring to male, as well as what are the different glands and the other ducts which is involved in secondary reproductive part of male reproductive system. Now, why is this testis present in the sac? I already told you, low temperature, that is 2 to 2.5 degrees Celsius, lower than the normal internal body temperature necessary for spermatogenesis. So if you ask me, if the temperature is not going to be reduced, will spermatogenesis occur? No. That's the reason why the testis has to descend into the sac. Now, this is the image which is present in your NCERT textbook. It's important that you know the exact labeling of it. Now, let us try to understand this particular image. So, as I told you, this is going to be the testis. So, which is present in the sac outside the abdominal cavity. So, that means the sperms are produced within the testis. Next, it has a cap-like structure here, which is called as epididymis, from which the sperm travel all the way up through the vas deferens, comes all the way here, and you see a sac. For me, it appears like a leaf-like structure, which is known as seminal vesicles. When the vas deferens and the seminal vesicle join, this junction is known as ejaculatory duct. From there, it passes into one single gland, which is unpaired, which is known as prostate gland. And as we come down, there is 2 bulb-like structure, which is known as bulbourethral gland. And this particular region, a long tube, which is nothing but urethra, see the connection, it comes from urinary bladder. So that means what? The male reproductive system is able to discharge semen through the same unit. Urine is also expelled out. So thereby we call the male reproductive system as urogenital system. Finally, it opens up via a small slit which is called as urethral meatus. Anyway, we are going to study this whole concept in detail, but I want you to please go through this diagrams and understand the labeling properly. With this, let's see what's next. Now, the testis appears to be oval shaped. Yes, we need to remember the size also. The length is about 4 to 5 centimeter and the width is about 2 to 3 centimeter. Now, the covering of the testis, we usually use a word which is known as tunica, okay, and it has a dense covering. So that means it is a protective covering. And within that, the so-called dense covering enters into the testis to form small compartment. And the count of this compartment is going to be 250. So you see the number here 250. Let us multiply it by 2 and mention 500 lobules in case of both the testes I'm talking about. Now, let us see this image. So this image, I want you to understand only one point. The so-called dense covering. Okay, so that so-called dense covering comes somewhere here. Let me highlight it. Okay, so this part I'm highlighting it. And let me write that particular region name. So let me make it a little bit thick for you. Tunica albuginea. The true covering of the testis. So please make a note of this word. So it is the true covering, the dense covering. Now already you know there are around 250 compartments. Now in that compartments, you will come across a highly coiled tubule which is 1 to 3 in number. Now let's see. The sentence is from your NCERT textbook. As I try to explain, you can follow the same thing with respect to your NCERT book. Now, each lobule contains the first highlighting term 1 to 3 highly coiled seminiferous tubule. Okay. Now, in the seminiferous tubule, the production of sperm is going to occur. So, in which sperms are produced? So, I can say the structural and functional unit is known as seminiferous tubule in case of male reproductive organ, the region where sperms are produced. Now, each seminiferous tubule, he's talking about what are the other contents of the seminiferous tubule. So, each seminiferous tubule are lined on inside by 2 types of cells. So, please highlight the types of cell, 2 types of cell. One is called the male germ cell, the cell which is undergoing a process called spermatogenesis, which is known as spermatogonia. So, first cell that we are highlighting is a male germ cell, otherwise known as spermatogonia. Now, you will also come across a little bit triangular shaped cell which is called as Sertoli cell. So, the Sertoli cell plays an important role in nourishment of this particular sperm. So, thereby, the male germ cell undergoes meiotic division, finally leading to sperm formation, while the Sertoli cell provides nourishment to that of the germ cell. Now, apart from that, Sertoli cell does perform different functions also. It also secretes hormone, which we shall further study in the topic. Next. Now, we finished within that particular seminiferous tubule. What are the regions? Okay. Now, see the next sentence of your textbook. The region outside the seminiferous tubule, the region outside. He calls those particular region as what? Interstitial space, which contains small blood vessel, and the cells present in that interstitial space is known as interstitial cell, but we all of us commonly know it by a name which is called as Leydig cell. And Leydig cells are those cells which actually are involved in production of the male sex hormone, the androgen testosterone. So this can be a direct question for you. What is the main function of Leydig cell? Then you will say it produces androgen, which is known as testosterone. See the next sentence. Leydig cells synthesize and secrete testicular hormones called androgen. Apart from that, immunologically competent cells are also present. Now, from this paragraph, what all we understood? First, which is called as structural and functional unit, seminiferous tubule. How many in number? 1 to 3. What exactly happened? Production of sperm took place. Next, what are the cells present in the region of seminiferous tubule? Two types. The male germ cells, otherwise called as spermatogonia. Second one is Sertoli cell. So spermatogonia underwent a process spermatogenesis, whereas Sertoli cell, according to the paragraph, it told it nourished. And I told you we are going to study furthermore function. Next, the space outside. We call the space as interstitial space, where we came across a cell called interstitial cell, which is known as Leydig cell. And what did it produce? The male hormone testosterone. I hope this particular paragraph is clear for you. With this, let us see a section of testis. Now, what do we understand in the section of testis? I told you about the true covering, tunica alveolea. Followed with that, you have germinal epithelium. So each circle which I have drawn here, it is that testicular lobule which we studied has 250 in number. Now observe within that particular lobule. I told tiny cells are present. What are those cells called? The male germ cell, which is known as spermatogonia. Along with that, you come across little bit larger cells, which is known as Sertoli cell. If you observe very carefully, you also see certain picture of the sperms being attached to the Sertoli cell. So that means they are getting nourished from the Sertoli cell. And outside, so outside is known as interstitial space. You come across this particular circle here, which I have termed it as what? Leydig cell. What did Leydig cell do? It produced the male hormone, which is called testosterone. Now, let us understand one more important function of this Sertoli cell. Now, here I have written AB letter. Now, AB stands for androgen binding protein. So, I am saying Sertoli cell not only nourished this particular sperm, it is producing a special type of protein which is known as AB, that is androgen binding protein. This androgen binding protein is directing the so-called testosterone hormone which is produced by the Leydig cell. So the testosterone hormone will be carried by the blood vessel to the different part of the male body. Let us say, if a male child is going to attain puberty, during that particular phase, the so-called testosterone hormone, which was carried by the blood, went to the different parts of the body. While it is going to different part of the body, in the region of the thyroid, the cartilage is going to break. So when it breaks, there is protrusion which is seen, which is known as Adam's apple. So what happened? There's a change in their voice. They had a high pitch voice, but after the breakage of the cartilage, it is now low pitch. So change in the voice of the male individual indicate the male has attained puberty. Okay, so that means what? Testosterone hormone is responsible for all the secondary sexual characteristic which is going to appear in male. But don't forget, the testosterone hormone should be entering into the region where the male germ cells are present. So now the testosterone hormone which is produced by the Leydig cell, if it has to enter into this particular region where the germ cells are present, this androgen binding protein produced by the Sertoli cell attracted the testosterone to enter in. Thereby, the spermatogonia entered the process of spermatogenesis to produce the sperm. Now let's understand it in a small, simple manner by looking into this flowchart. Now, I told spermatogonia. Where they are present inside the lobule, these cells. They are produced in large number because there are around 200 to 300 million sperm in 2 to 3 ml of semen. So they have to first multiply by a simple process which is known as mitotic division. Later, they are called as primary spermatocyte. The primary spermatocyte, when it is going to give rise to a spermatid, it will undergo meiosis 1, where I have referred as R, reductional division, followed with the formation of secondary spermatocyte, which follows meiosis 2, which is called as equational division, which forms a circular cell which is haploid in nature. So this particular cell now gets transformed into a sperm containing haploid nucleus. So this whole process requires a hormone which is known as testosterone. So thereby the testosterone had to enter in, and that was brought inside by a protein called as androgen binding protein secreted from the Sertoli cell. Now, hope that part is clear for you. Now, let us study the parts of the testis, then we can understand what are the secondary reproductive organs. So now, as you see, I have labeled different types of tunica, but I want you to remember the true covering, okay? Followed with that, the so-called dense covering, when it enters the testis, it is going to form lobules, okay? 250 lobules. Within that particular lobule, you will come across what? Seminiferous tubule. Look at the chart how I have given. So testicular lobule consists of seminiferous tubule. Within the seminiferous tubule, there is production of sperms by a process called spermatogenesis. So we'll end it here. So this is the part which is connected to primary reproductive organ. From there, the sperm has to be transported. So all those which is going to transport, protect or nourish, they come under secondary reproductive organ. So I'm starting with this network-like region. It's just like a net so that we can trap the sperms, okay? Which is known as rete testis. So you see the word which is called rete testis. Rete testis is connected to one more coiled structure which is called as vasa efferentia. So now these two regions contain what is known as cilias. So I hope you know what is cilias, small hair-like structure. Why? Because the sperm which is being produced, they do not know how to move. So they have to be pushed. From the rete testis to vasa efferentia, cilias are there. They are going to push this particular sperm so that they reach one of the most important region which is known as epididymis. So you can see the highlighted part here. Now, in the epididymis region, they are not only stored, they will get activated and they will learn to move. So let us say that the sperm which is going to be present in the epididymis, okay, sperm which is going to be present in epididymis, learned to swim. By chance, let us say the sperms are not ejaculated out. They will die there. So phagocytic cells are going to consume it. So that means what? When a male attains puberty, the spermatogenesis starts from that particular stage and it is going to continue till the end of his life. Maybe at the age of 60 plus, there is something called reproductive climax. There might be slight reduction, but it continues throughout the lifetime of a male individual, unlike females. So now, if you check epididymis, I have divided it into three parts. The first, which is known as the head, is known as caput. Then you come across the middle part, which is known as corpus. And the cauda part, the tail part of the epididymis, is connected to what is called as vas deferens, which is going to come all the way out of the testis. So I hope you understood this particular image. Followed with this. Now, it's a simple chart which will tell about secondary reproductive organ of the male part, which includes the duct. So I've started with rete testis, then comes vasa efferentia. Don't forget that we came across cilia here, followed with epididymis, vas deferens. So I hope this picture is really clear. You can see seminiferous tubule, lobules, rete testis. Now, I did say epididymis had three parts, and it has upper part which is known as caput, middle part which is known as corpus, lower part which is called as cauda. So this is a region where they are stored. They are not only stored, they are activated. They learn how to swim. If the semen is not ejaculated out, the same region, they tend to die also. Okay. Next. As you see, I've taken the same photo image of your NCERT textbook, last paragraph of the second page. Now let us read the same thing. Whatever you understood, I'm going to re-explain it with a sentence which is present in your NCERT book. The male sex accessory duct. So this is referring to what? Secondary reproductive organ, the ducts, which includes rete testis, vasa efferentia, epididymis, vas deferens. Next he says, seminiferous tubules of the testis open into the vasa effrontia. Open into the vasa effrontia through a network-like structure which is called as rete testis. Next, vasa effrontia leaves the testis and open into epididymis. Now you need to highlight this point. Located along what region? Posterior surface of each testis. Next, epididymis leads to vas deferens that ascends to the abdomen. See the word loops over what? Urinary bladder. So, as it vas deferens moves over, ascends over the abdomen, it loops over urinary bladder to receive a duct from what? Seminal vesicle which opens into urethra. So that means vas deferens as well as seminal vesicle joined and then opens into urethra. So when these two structures join, you come across the word ejaculatory duct. So please highlight this point. These ducts transport the sperm from the testis to the outside through urethra. So urethra originates. From where did urethra originate? Highlight this point also. From the urinary bladder, extends through the penis and to the external opening. The opening is a small slit which is known as urethral meatus. I hope the whole sentence given in this particular paragraph is crystal clear to you. Now, let us go across the next part of the slide. Now, I have given a rough image which I have drawn for you. Let us understand the paragraph what we studied. Okay, now pair of testes. From here you can see a cap-like structure which is known as epididymis. You have vas deferens. All the way it comes, loops over and comes here as it is going to join the urethra. Before that, this structure should have been drawn in a different manner. It should be like leaf-like structure, which is nothing but seminal vesicles, which joins and forms ejaculatory duct and passes into a round gland, that is unpaired gland, cross-stage gland. Then you have the urethra and followed with that you have what is called as bulb-like structure, which is known as bulbourethral gland. And as you come down, you do come across something known as erectile tissue. Now this erectile tissue, which is bundle of three, present in the male penis, carpora cavernosa or carpora spongiosum. That's okay, you need not remember the name. It's a region where the blood is going to rush into the penis, which causes the erection. Due to that, semen is ejaculated out. So that means the flow of blood is not going to occur in this particular tissue, means erection does not occur and ejection of semen does not occur. So this condition can be called as impotency. Okay. So now, as we see, this comes all the way down to the penis, which one? Urethra, and opens via a small slit, which is known as urethral meatus. So I hope the image is clear for you. Okay. Now, followed with this, let us now come across the male penis, which is considered to be the external genitalia. So, penis is the male external genitalia made up of special tissue which helps in erection. I already told you that facilitates insemination. The enlarged part of the penis is called as glans penis, which is covered by a fold of skin which is known as foreskin. So, there's a flow chart for you to make it much more simplified. So penis has the main part which is known as shaft. It ends with glans where you come across a slit, and that slit is known as urethral meatus, through which expulsion of urine as well as semen occurred. So I hope this particular concept is clear for you. Now once we are done with it, the next subheading in your textbook is male accessory glands. Now let us look into male accessory glands, starting with seminal vesicle. Now remember, maximum secretion which is contributed by the seminal vesicle is about 60%. That itself will be your question. Now if you see the word which is present in your textbook, they say it appears like a sac-like structure. I usually visualize it in the form of a leaf-like structure. So you can see vas deferens is going to join, and as it comes here, seminal vesicle also join. This is where we call them as what? Ejaculatory duct. Don't forget, that's your question. Now, pair of sac-like structure at the base of the bladder, urinary bladder. They produce alkaline secretion, which forms 60% of the volume of the semen. Next, the secretion contains fructose, a fruit sugar. Next, you have prostaglandins. It's a kind of chemical which is actually playing a role to bring about contraction of smooth muscle in the female reproductive tract. Okay. Next, you have clotting proteins. Yes, there is presence of some amount of clotting proteins which keeps this particular sperm within the semen. But when the semen is released into the female reproductive gland, the secretion of prostrate gland dilutes this particular protein. Okay. So next, followed with that, prostrate gland. Now don't forget, seminal vesicles were paired. In case of prostrate gland, it is unpaired. So your question is very direct. Name the unpaired accessory gland, then you will say it is prostrate gland. Now as you see, this is the urinary bladder in which urine is present. Now assume this has one single gland, but you see what is called as urethra going by. So this is known as your prostrate gland. It's a single gland. It also produces what is called as alkaline secretion. So it's a single large gland that surrounds what is called as urethra. Now please remember this point. The color to the semen, which is said to be milky, or the smell to the semen, is also added by the prostrate gland. This alkaline secretion, which forms how much? 25% of the semen. Okay. So all the fluid is going to be alkaline. Don't forget. If you see urine, it is slightly acidic. In order to counteract that particular acidic thing, there is alkaline secretion taking place. Finally, the secretion of prostrate gland, what did it do? It brought about nourishment, activates the spermatozoon to swim. Now, this is very important. Name the secretion or name the gland which brings about activation of the sperm in the female reproductive tract. Then your answer becomes the secretion of prostrate gland. And let us add one more point before we go to this particular slide. Let me go back. Let us also write there is presence of what? Calcium ions also present. It's also very important. Okay. So just add that particular point. Next. Let's see what's our next gland. Bulbourethral gland, otherwise called as Cowper's gland. Now you see this pair. It's not that clear, but you see two bulb-like structure. That is going to be the Cowper's gland. What did they do? They actually are present on the either side of urethra. They are secreting a kind of alkaline fluid which neutralizes the acid from urine. All the three did the same, but I would like to use a word, mucus, which helps in lubricating during the act of copulation. So I hope you understood all the glands till now, whatever we studied. Now finally, we are going to revise the whole concept. So I have two pictures here. So simultaneously, when you study the concept, let us understand how it is. So this is the testis, where it is present within the sac. Okay. Now from the testis, you came across the lobules where seminiferous tubules were there. From there, whatever sperms were transported came to this region which is called as epididymis. So this is the epididymis. From there, a long structure emerged. You can see that long structure, which is nothing but vas deferens, came all the way. And you see this particular sac, which is known as seminal vesicle. After looping over, it comes in joins here. And it forms what is called as ejaculatory duct. Finally, it comes all the way. This particular circle is prostrate gland, followed with bulbourethral gland. Then you have the common passage, which is known as urethra. And this part is known as the glans penis, where there's a small swelling, which is known as ampulla. Okay? Ampulla. And finally, the slit is known as urethral meatus. So I hope till here you have understood the concept. Now with this, we have to conclude what is known as semen. Now let us understand semen. The secretion of accessory glands, all the accessory glands, along with mucus produced from Cowper's gland, are added to the sperm to form what is called as seminal fluid, or call it as semen. or seminal plasma. The pH is around 7.35 to 7.5. Now, if you ask why is it so? The female reproductive part is going to be acidic due to presence of lactic acid bacteria. Okay, so here the secretion will be alkaline. A single ejaculation may contain, how much I told, 200 to 300 million sperms or spermatozoa. And I gave one extra point. The removal of testes is called as orchidectomy. So I hope all of you made a note of this particular content. So this finishes the first part of the topic, the male reproductive system. Now, once you are finished with this, I want you to re-revise the topic, understand the concept clearly, and then move on to the next part. The next part of the topic is female reproductive system. Here we are again studying about just an introduction. Once again, once we finish female reproductive system, we are going to study the next part, which is formation of gametes known as gametogenesis. Before we go to that, let us understand female reproductive system. Okay, female reproductive system. Again, primary reproductive organ is pair of ovaries along with pair of oviducts. Uterus, cervix, vagina and external genitalia located where? In the pelvic region. All these are what we are going to study in detail. Next, please check this sentence from your NCERT which says, all these parts which is mentioned above, along with it, pair of mammary glands, see the word, integrated structurally and functionally to support the process of ovulation, fertilization, pregnancy, birth and childcare. So all this particular concept we are going to cover in detail. So I hope you understood the introduction part of it. Now with this, let us start with the primary reproductive organ, which is said to be ovaries. So they produce a female gamete, ovum, and several other what? Steroidal hormones or ovarian hormones. Now let us highlight these steroidal hormones, what we have to remember. Now if you check, I have written estrogen, progesterone, relaxin, inhibin. Okay, so make a note of this. This is not given in your NCERT textbook towards the side. Please make a note of the hormones secreted by the ovaries. Now followed with that, just check what is the sentence given in your textbook. The ovaries are located each side of the lower abdomen. The ovary measures around 2 to 4 centimeter in length, is connected to the pelvic wall and the uterus, and the word is ligament. How are the ovaries attached? If the question comes, you shall use a word which is called as ligament. Where and all it is attached? Please check pelvic wall and the uterus connected by what? Ligament. So I hope this introduction part was clear. Now with this, let us just come across the basic diagram. So if you check, ovaries are present, 2 ovary, now 1 ovary. Now let us say this is a ligament-like structure. Now when I'm talking about this fallopian tube, let us assume the fallopian tube is like this. And it's not attached to the ovary, there's a gap. Okay, in this image you don't see the gap clearly, so there's a gap. Okay, so please assume it has such. So this oviduct attaches to what is known as uterus. There's a narrow region which is called as cervix, which opens out to the vaginal part. So please learn the labeling. And now we shall understand again primary and secondary reproductive organ. Before that, let us have a basic understanding about the ovary part. It's covered by a thin epithelium which encloses ovarian stroma, and the stroma is divided into how many zones? 2 zones. A peripheral region which is called as cortex and an inner region which is called as medulla. Now, see the image. Now, in this image, let us understand certain parts. Now, you see this outer line which has been written as germinal epithelium. Now, you come across what is called as cortex. This is the outer part. Okay. Medulla, this is going to be the inner region. Please make an observation. I have just drawn some, thread-like structures. It's a blood vessels, nervous system, lymphatic system, which is going to enter through that particular junction, which is called as hilum. And if you see the structures here, these are nothing but the developing follicles. So primary follicle grows up to secondary, then becomes tertiary, and fully matured follicle is called as Graafian follicle, which here is releasing the ova, and the process is called as ovulation. And the ruptured follicle is known as corpus luteum, which is involved in production of progesterone and estrogen. Finally, if fertilization is not going to occur, that particular corpus luteum loses its color, transforms into a small whitish structure which is called as corpus albicans. All this we are going to study in detail, so please go through the structure of the ovary once. Now with this, we shall revise the same thing. Present below the germinal epithelium, a tough, highly cellular connective tissue which is called as stroma is present. And how did we divide the stroma? The outer region we called it as cortex, whereas the inner region we called it as medulla. And what have I written in the region of medulla? Richly supplied with blood vessel, few nerves and lymphatic vessel. The point at which they are making an entry into the ovary, we call that particular region as hilus. Okay, don't forget. We did come across in the region of kidney, right? The point at which all the blood vessels enter in. So the same region, okay? Next, cortex. Now, what is this particular cortex containing? I did say a cortex, the cortex of a mature ovary contains ovarian follicle. Now, these ovarian follicle tend to grow after a female attains maturity because female sex hormone plays an important role in the growth of these particular follicles. When they start growing, you will come across different terms. I have roughly given certain terms. Primary, secondary, tertiary, Graafian follicle, then it transforms into corpus luteum, then corpus albicans. I've just mentioned this. But here, let us highlight one important point, okay? So that point is, only one ovarian follicle matures in an adult woman every 28 days, alternating in the two ovaries. Now, this will be your MCQ. Two ovaries, okay? One on the right, one on the left. Let us say this month, the right ovary released the egg. So that means next month it is going to be the left side. So they're going to alternate. So that means in a year, each ovary can produce only 6 eggs. So altogether, both the ovaries, two ovaries together, is going to produce 12 ovas in a year. So this can be your question. Please make a note of it. So I hope this part is clear for you. Now with this, revising the concept. What have I written? Primary sex organ. And what is the term mentioned here? Ovaries. You know what did ovaries do? They started to produce what? Gametes. The region where gametes are produced. Involved in the production of hormones. Okay. Apart from producing gamete, they are involved in production of what? Hormones. Which helps in maintaining secondary sex organ, accessory glands and sex characters in female body. Then, what are secondary sex organs in female body? Sex organs, glands and ducts that do not produce gamete but essential for what? Sexual reproduction. What are the terms present in our textbook? Oviducts, which is also called as fallopian tube, uterus, vagina, constitute the female accessory duct. So hope that you are clear with what is meant by primary, what is meant by secondary sex organ. Now with this, let's see the next part. Now I'm going to teach you part by part so that you understand all the secondary reproductive ducts. Okay, so I'm starting with fallopian tube. So highlighted word is fallopian tube. Please remember the length of it. 10 to 12 centimeter. Long extends from the periphery of the each ovary. Now, in this diagram, if this is the ovary, I told you that it's not attached to the ovary, okay? So it will come like this. So now as you see, this particular finger-like projection, whatever I have drawn, is known as what? Fimbrium. Followed with a funnel-shaped structure. Yes, I'm using the word which is known as funnel-shaped structure, known as infundibulum. It comes all the way, becomes a little bit wider here. This region is known as ampulla. It is wider because it's the place where a sperm and ova are going to meet to bring about a process called fertilization. So if there is a question, which is a region where fertilization is going to occur, you will say that region is called as ampulla. Finally, the oviduct narrows and attaches to the uterus. The region of the oviduct which is attached to the part of the uterus will be called as isthmus. So I hope you understood the different regions here. Now once again we shall revise. The part closer to the ovary, funnel shaped, is known as what? Infundibulum. This sentence directly came in one of your MCQs, so make sure you read the sentence of your NCRT very clearly. Next, the edges of this particular infundibulum has finger-like projection. Now the question is, why it is having finger-like projection? So during the act of ovulation, let us say the ova is released here, the egg is released here. When the egg is released, the finger-like projection of the oviduct, the fimbriae, helps in intake of the ova. It is said that exactly during the process of ovulation, this finger-like projection fimbriae moves closer to the ovary in order to receive this particular ova. So, finger-like projection called as fimbriae helps in the collection of the ovum after ovulation. So, the ovum is taken into the oviduct by the finger-like projection. Next, the infundibulum leads to, see the word, wider part of the oviduct which is known as ampulla. And I did say that the part of fertilization, the fusion of sperm and ova, occurs in the junction of ampulla. Next comes the last part of the oviduct which is known as isthmus. It joins to the region which is known as uterus. So we completed the complete part of fallopian tube. I hope that you don't have any sort of doubt in this particular section. Okay, let's move on to the next part, uterus part. So as you see, uterus is single and we have written the term which is called as womb. Womb is the region where the baby is going to grow. So as you see the next sentence, the shape of the uterus is inverted pear-like structure. So I've drawn only the uterus part. I have cut off the fallopian tube. So now if you observe this particular cavity, the cavity is where the baby is going to develop. So this uterine cavity itself is called as womb. And the structure here appears to be like an inverted pear. So this question already came here. So highlight that particular part in your textbook. Now, it is supported by ligaments attached to the pelvic wall. Next, uterus opens to the vagina through a narrow cervix. Now you can see what is called as narrow cervix. The cavity of the cervix is called as cervical canal, which along with the vagina forms birth canal. So I want you to highlight that particular point, especially which says cervical canal along with vagina forms what is called as birth canal. So now, if you observe the image, I have written 3 more extra points here, which speaks about the layers. Outermost perimetrium, the middle myometrium, the innermost endometrium, which undergoes cyclic changes. Now let us concentrate on all this. Now, this is the same image which is present in your NCRT textbook. In this particular image, let us now overall understand the concept. So we all know that ovary is attached to the abdominal cavity and the uterus via ligament, and it has 2 parts, cortex and medulla. When ovulation occurs, the ova is released outside in the cavity, where the finger-like projection of the fallopian tube, which is known as fimbriae, takes up this particular ova, comes to the next funnel-shaped structure which we studied as what? Infundibulum. As it moves upward, it enlarges, where we studied wider part, where sperm and ova unite, and that part is known as fertilization junction. And the part of the fallopian tube which attaches to the uterus is known as the isthmus part. When uterus starts, the elevated portion is known as fundus. Then comes uterine cavity, which we studied as womb, which appears to be an inverted pear-shaped structure. Next, we have the 3 layers, outermost perimetrium, middle myometrium, inner endometrium, then cervix, which has a narrow canal, that is cervical canal, which joins vagina. Cervical canal and the vagina together was known as Birth canal. Now, let us go across the NCERT sentence. Now, here I have written you certain points. Let us finish off this, then we'll study NCERT part. Fundus, the upper dome-shaped region above the level of entry of oviduct, is known as fundus. Body, the main part of the uterus, which is broad towards the fundus and it narrows towards the cervix. Cervix, a small, narrow, cylindrical, inferior extremity of the uterus which communicates with the vagina. The cavity of the cervix between the internal OS refers to orifice and the external orifice is called as external cervical canal. Now, the wall of the uterus has 3 layers. Now, one is perimetrium, second is myometrium, third is endometrium. So now I'm going to introduce certain terms which you can highlight it in your textbook. See how I have highlighted. The external thin membranous perimetrium. It just covers, protective in nature. Second, middle, thick. And what's the word? Smooth muscle myometrium. This is the one which plays an important role during muscular contraction while childbirth is taking place. Next, the inner, see the word, glandular endometrium that lines the uterus. So I want you to concentrate on the highlighted terms here. External is thin, middle is thick. It is what muscle they will ask you. Don't ever think of striated. It is smooth muscle, myometrium. And which is the glandular layer? It is going to be endometrium, which undergoes what is known as cyclic changes. Next, the endometrium undergoes cyclic changes during the menstrual cycle, while the myometrium exhibits a strong contraction during the delivery of the baby. I hope the points are very clear. Please counter check your NCERT textbook and highlight all the terms what I mentioned right now. Now, with this, let us speak about the vaginal part. It's elastic muscular tube, which is around 8 to 10 centimeter, which functions as, see, I've highlighted the terms, I want you to remember it. Female copulatory organ, pathway for menstrual flow, as well as the birth canal. That means what? During the act of insemination, the semen was received in the same junction. Followed with that, menstrual flow occurs. The unwanted wall, that is the endometrium wall, which is made up of blood vessels, when they rupture, if pregnancy is not going to occur, that flow, which is known as menstrual flow, occurs via the same region. And the birth of the baby occurs through the same canal. So it is also called as what? Birth canal. The opening of the vagina is called as vaginal orifice. So am I clear with all the points here? Now with this, I have also given certain important points. Okay, now remember, vagina is non-keratinized, stratified squamous epithelium. I hope you know what is called as keratin, the structural protein. Example, it is present in your hair, it is present on your nails, it is present in your nails. So if there is a question, is vagina said to be containing keratin? No. Next, devoid of glands. So that means what? Glands are not present in this region. So what about the secretion then? So the glands are actually present in the cervix region. Whatever secretion has to occur is secreted in the cervix region, which is flown into the vaginal part. So glands are not present in the vagina. Now, there are folds of skin. I hope you would have come across this particular word if you would have studied the stomach internal structure. The folds of the stomach, which helps in mixing up of food, that folds is called as rugae. Such kind of folds are also seen in the vaginal part. So I did say a word which is known as prostaglandin when I was talking about the semen part. And I also said that it is involved in bringing about contraction of the smooth muscle. Here you go. This is what I'm talking about. If the semen comes in contact with respect to this folds, which is known as rugae, it brings about contraction, which helps in intake of the semen, which is discharged in the region of vagina. And this is a region where insemination occurs. So the word which is known as copulatory organ is given for it. Now, followed with this, if you check, vaginal orifice is covered by perforated membrane, which is called as hymen. We all know that a virginity of a female cannot be determined by this particular hymen. Okay, so now let's come across the other parts of the external genitalia. Okay, so external genitalia, it always starts with what? Mons pubis, labia majora, labia minora, hymen, and clitoris. Okay. Now, if you are talking about mons pubis, it is nothing but the region which contains fat, and it contains what is known as skin with pubic hair. So that's the mons pubis, which cushion of fatty tissues by skin and pubic hair. Labia majora, the fleshy folds of tissue which extends down from the mons pubis and surrounds the vaginal opening. Followed with that, there is minora, a pair of fold of tissue under labia majora. So majora is larger, minora is smaller. Okay. Now, opening of the vagina is often covered partially by a membrane called as hymen. I already spoke about it. Now, this is an important sentence. Now, you see a word which is known as clitoris, a tiny finger-like structure which lies at the what end? Upper junction of the two labia minora above the urethral opening. A homologous organ to the male penis is what in case of female? Clitoris. The ends of this particular region, whether it is the penis part or the clitoris, it has the maximum nerve endings which is able to sense what is called as pleasure. So, a small rough chart. Opening of the vagina is enclosed by two muscular folds. But please remember, towards the minor fold, you will come across clitoris, which is a small mass of erectile tissue. Do you remember erectile tissue in case of male, which I told you it is present in 3 bundles? The blood is going to rush into it, which causes erection. So in case of female also, same thing happens in a region which is called as clitoris. So erectile tissue here is known as clitoris. Okay, so now let's highlight some important points. Clitoris is what? Homologous organ to male penis. Extension of labia minora joins to form the fold of the skin. See, I've written the foreskin also here. Anterior part of the vaginal orifice and the posterior to the clitoris is known as external urethral opening. So I hope you made a note of all these particular points. So we completed what is called as external genitalia. If we have completed, then we have to refer to this particular image which is present in NCERT. Let us make a quick observation of this image and understand. Now, the first thing that I want you people to concentrate is this region. Okay. Now, this region is known as urinary bladder. Okay. So, let us put dotted lines and say this is urinary bladder which is filled with urine. Now, observe on top of it, the top structure is called as uterus. You see this particular cavity here. This is the uterine cavity. That's where the baby is going to develop. So it is continued here. Then this particular region, I'm talking about what is called as vagina. Next, what is urethra? The small part is known as urethra. Urethra is longer in case of male, shorter in case of female. And I hope you get to see the two openings here. For urine, separate path, and for discharge of semen or release of menstrual fluid or the childbirth, a separate path. So you will never use a word which is known as urogenital in case of female. Urinary pathway is different, and the insemination or menstrual fluid discharge or the childbirth occurs in a different pathway. So I hope you understood, and you can just check out. This region is known as the clitoris part. So I hope this particular image is clear for you. It is better you go through your textbook, understand the image, because you will be having diagrams to be labeled in your MCQs. So I hope this part is clear for you. Now, we finished with male reproductive system, female reproductive system. But female reproductive system comes along with what is called as other glands, in which we are going to study about what is known as mammary glands. So let us come across this mammary glands. The mammary glands develop has secondary sexual characteristic in female, and the main hormone involved in it is said to be estrogen. And this estrogen is secreted by the growing follicles, which we are going to study in the next part of this particular topic. But before that, let us understand what is this mammary gland. So if you check this particular image, you will come across what is known as a fat tissue which is present in the mammary gland. Along with the fat tissue, there are lobes. Now the lobes number is said to be 15 lobes, 15 to 20 lobes according to NCERT. And if you check within this particular lobe, you will come across mammary, small, tiny little glands, where you studied a word which is known as alveoli, in which production of milk occurs. Now don't forget, relate your first PUC's 22nd chapter, that's the last chapter, that is endocrine system, where your anterior pituitary produced a hormone which is called as prolactin. Prolactin hormone is required for production of milk in the alveoli. But if the milk has to be ejected out of the mammary gland, then the hormone which is stored in posterior part of pituitary, which is known as oxytocin, is required for ejection of milk. Now, as you see, it comes with respect to secretory cells, which is mammary secretory epithelial cell. Finally, when the milk is being produced, it comes out through lactiferous duct. So, lactiferous duct, and it comes in joints, lactiferous sinuses, and it opens into minute opening where the milk is expelled outside. If the milk has to be expelled outside, please don't forget the hormone oxytocin. Now let us just refer this with respect to what we studied in NCERT. Okay, so keep your books ready. A functional mammary gland is characteristic of all female mammals. So mammals are those animals which is going to nourish the young ones via their milk, which is produced in the mammary gland. So this becomes one of the unique characteristics of mammals. Next, mammary glands are paired structure, which is called as breast, that contains glandular tissue. Now remember, gland means they're going to secrete something, and variable amount of fat. Fat is deposited around this particular region. But please don't forget, make a note, the hormone responsible for the development of mammary gland is estrogen. Next, the glandular tissue of each breast is divided into how many mammary loops. So whatever words has been highlighted in blue, make a flow chart of it, because they will ask you MCQ based on flow chart also. So all the blue words which I have highlighted, make it as a flow chart. So in 15 to 20 mammary lobes, we contain cluster of cells. Those cluster of cells are called as what? Alveoli, within which production of milk is going to occur. Now, the cells of the alveoli secreted milk, which is stored in cavities of what? Alveoli. So the cavities are also called as lumen, which is storing the milk. Now, the other blue word which I have highlighted here, the alveoli open into mammary tubules. Then the tubules of each lobe join mammary duct. Next, the mammary ducts join together to form a wider mammary ampulla, which is connected to lactiferous duct, and the milk is sucked out of it. So I hope you understood the concept. Now please, towards the side of your textbook, in the space whatever you have, I want you to mention the flow chart. 15 to 20 mammary lobes is made up of alveoli, clusters of alveoli. Whatever milk is being produced is opened into mammary tubules, which join mammary duct and joins lactiferous duct, which is going to be coming out of the mammary gland. We're going to start with a topic which is known as gametogenesis, nothing but formation of gametes. So let us start today's topic. So in the first half of the topic, we are going to study about formation of a male gametes, spermatogenesis. But before that, all of us know that gametogenesis is nothing but formation of gametes. If formation of gametes is going to occur, it will take place in the reproductive organ which is called as gonads. In case of male, testes; in case of female, ovaries. So we call those particular region as primary reproductive organ, which produces gametes. Along with the gametes, they are also involved in production of different types of sex hormones, such as In case of male, it is testosterone. In case of female, it is going to be estrogen and progesterone. Along with that, other hormones can also be seen producing. For example, you have come across inhibin. You also have come across relaxin hormone. Okay. So followed with this, if you check how many types of gametogenesis has occurred, you would have come across two types. One is formation of sperm, which is known as spermatogenesis, and the other one is known as formation of ovum, which is known as oogenesis. So with this, we want to understand the first process, that is formation of sperm. So as you see in testis, we came across 250 lobules, within which we did study structural and functional unit of the testis has seminiferous tubule. Within the seminiferous tubule, the cells known as the germ cells or spermatogonia cells, which undergoes a process of division to multiply in large number. We call that particular division in the initial stage as what? Mitotic division, to produce millions of spermatogonia. Once the millions of spermatogonias are formed, which is said to be diploid, undergoes a process of meiosis to produce what is known as spermatids. Spermatids undergo conversion, which is known as spermiogenesis, transforms themselves into a sperm. That process is known as spermiogenesis. Now let us study the whole concept. So let us finish up quick and do a complete revision of the topic. The spermatogonium or spermatogonia are present where? This will be your question. In the inside wall of seminiferous tubule. And what is the initial division taking place? Mitotic division. Why? In 2 to 3 ml of semen, there should be presence of 200 million to 300 million sperms. So if I am talking about million count, I am talking about what kind of division? Mitotic division, to increase in number. Followed with that, each spermatogonium is said to be diploid. They are 2n and contains how many chromosomes? 46 chromosomes. Some of the spermatogonium are called as primary spermatocyte, which will undergo what division? Meiosis. When the word meiosis comes, we know that reductional division is going to take place. Now, if we write a flowchart related to spermatogenesis, so you start with spermatogonium, which is 2n, which is diploid in nature with 46 chromosomes, which underwent mitotic division and gave rise to what is called as primary spermatocyte, which is 2n, which undergoes first meiotic division, that is second spermatocytes are produced with a half the number of chromosomes. So first meiosis is considered to be reductional division, which is followed with second meiotic division, where spermatids with haploid set of chromosomes are produced, which undergoes a process called differentiation to become what is called as spermatozoon, which is the only cell of the human body which contains flagella, so that it tends to move towards the female gamete and it is said to be haploid. So I hope that you have made a note of what all point I have discussed so far. Next, if you look into this particular chart, here I have mentioned the process of what is called as spermatids getting converted into sperm. So if you see a cell here, it is somewhat circular, but the same cell has developed a flagella at the end. Now for example, you may come across one important question, please make a note of it. The sperm head contains a region which is called as acrosome, which contains enzyme which can digest the membrane of the ovum. Then you speak about this particular acrosome, and if they ask you from which organelle it is made up of, you will always remember Golgi complex. Please don't forget it. Now as you check, you may see the word what is called as flagellum here. But please understand, you're talking about what is called as axial filament, which arises from one of these centriole. And if you check, there is formation of different region of the sperm, which is called as sperm head, middle piece and the tail. And if you observe in this particular region, you can see acrosome. For example, an enzyme which is known as hyaluronidase is seen to be present there, which can digest the membrane of the ovum at the point of contact. And you can see this yellow color structure which seems to be spiral in shape, which is called as mitochondria, which provides ATP, energy for the sperm's motility. And the longest part of the sperm is said to be the tail. So this process is known as what? Spermiogenesis. Now check out. The spermatids are transformed into spermatozoa, which is otherwise known as sperms, by a process called as spermiogenesis. Next, after spermiogenesis, the sperm head becomes embedded to which cell? Sertoli cell. What is the work of Sertoli cell? It brings about nourishing this particular gamete and finally released from the seminiferous tubule by a process which is called as spermiation. So please remember all the terms which starts with letter S here. Spermatogenesis we studied. Next we studied spermiogenesis. Next we are talking about Sertoli cell which gave nourishment. And after that, the sperm is going to release itself and move away. That process is known as spermiation. And please do remember, the time required for one set of production of spermatogenesis to be completed is said to be 64 days. Make a note of this particular number. Okay? Now, this is a picture taken directly from your NCERT textbook, and I hope all of you have studied the schematic representation. So first thing starts, when does spermatogenesis start? At puberty, because in case of oogenesis, in fetal stage only it starts. So thereby it becomes one of the important difference in male and female. So if you see here in the first part, the word is mitosis, and if you see the number of chromosome, he represents 46. Next we speak about primary spermatocyte, which enters the process of meiotic division, which is said to be reductional division. So we call this particular secondary spermatocyte with half the number of chromosome, which is said to be 23, followed with second meiotic division, where we give rise to what is known as spermatids. Please observe the cells. These are said to be circular, and these circular cell, which is said to be haploid, undergoes a process which is known as differentiation to form what is known as spermatozoon, and that process was known as spermiogenesis, and the number of chromosome is said to be half the number 23, and the whole process took about 64 days to be completed. And on the other side, I have given the same image of your NCERT textbook. Reason behind that is, you will have your MCQs based on the labeling of the diagram. For example, I may ask you which among the following is considered to be the Sertoli cell. So please make an observation where exactly the Sertoli cell is, what is the shape of it, so that you do not make a mistake while answering the question. So I hope this image you understood. With this, we are going to study about hormonal regulation. So when we speak about hormonal regulation, not only in this particular topic, please don't forget first PUC's chemical coordination topic, in which hypothalamus, the master gland, because only if hypothalamus says the anterior pituitary to release the gonadotropic hormone, only then anterior pituitary is going to release it. Here, hypothalamus releases gonadotropic releasing hormone, which is of two types. One is called as FSH. Please observe the blue arrow mark where it is going. It is entering the seminiferous tubule where spermatogonias are present. So spermatogenesis is initiated by which hormone will be your question? Then your answer is FSH. Now observe LH, which is a green color arrow mark here, which is acting on the Leydig cell, which is outside the lobule. that is in the interstitial space, and these Leydig cells produce the male androgen which is called testosterone, and that testosterone enters into one particular green color shaped cell which is nothing but Sertoli cell. The reason behind that is, maybe in the previous class I would have told you, Sertoli cell produces androgen binding protein. Due to this androgen binding protein, testosterone is attracted to enter inside this particular lobule, because only when testosterone reaches, the process of spermatogenesis gets completed. So here we complete the process of spermatogenesis. So what are we supposed to remember in the previous slide? Remember, FSH acts on which cell? Sertoli cell, and stimulates the secretion of some factor for spermatogenesis, or in simple term, FSH is required to initiate the process of what? Spermatogenesis. Then what does LH do? LH acts on a cell which is known as Leydig cell and stimulates the production of androgen, because without androgen the process of spermatogenesis cannot be completed. So Sertoli cell attracted this testosterone hormone to complete the process of what? Spermatogenesis. I hope it's clear. Okay. Now with this we are going to study the structure of the sperm. Please practice the diagram, not to draw it but labeling of it. As you see, the sperm is differentiated into head, middle piece and tail, but still between a head and a middle piece there is a region which is called as the neck region. There is presence of plasma membrane. You come across what is called as acrosome filled with lytic enzyme, nucleus containing chromosomal material which is said to be haploid, and you come across middle piece and you see mitochondria, and this mitochondria is going to give you more energy, I mean to say the sperm more energy to swim into the female reproductive part. And please make an observation with respect to the tail, which is said to be the largest part of the sperm. So if there is a question which part of the sperm is said to be much longer, so you will always mention it is going to be the tail part of the sperm. Now, a mature sperm is around 60 micron in size, smaller than that of the female gamete, whose body is covered with what is called as plasma membrane. Maybe at the end piece of the tail, plasma membrane may be absent. So we call it as end piece, which is mainly present for swift movement of the sperm. A sperm has three regions. I already told head and middle piece is connected by a small junction which is called as neck. But we differentiate it as head, middle piece and the tail region. Make sure you remember all the points. Okay. With this, head, oval shaped, formed with two parts, nucleus and acrosome. Acrosome is formed of organelle known as Golgi complex. See here itself I have mentioned here, and it contains lytic enzyme. Behind the head is the neck region. Next, middle piece is composed of what? Axial filament, surrounded by mitochondria and cytoplasm. Mitochondria's main work is to provide energy for what? Sperm's motility. Next, tail consists of central axial filament. The sperm moves in the fluid medium and the genital tract by the undulating movement of what? Of the tail. Finally, your NCERT gives this particular sentence telling that human male ejaculates about 200 to 300 million sperm during coitus, of which for normal fertility. So it's given the number. So if the number is going to be less than 150 million, I shall use a term which is called oligospermia. So remember, the count of the sperm has to be this much. Next, 60%. I want you to remember the percentage. 60% of the sperm must have normal shape and size. At least 40% of them must show vigorous motility. I hope you remember the viability of the gametes. So motility plays an important role because ova has a shorter lifespan that of the sperm. Next, secretion of epididymis, vas deferens, seminal vesicle, prostrate are essential for maturation and motility of these sperms. The same sentence of NCERT has been given here. Okay, now followed with that, seminal plasma along with sperms constitute the semen. The functions of male accessory ducts and glands are maintained by testicular hormone, which is known as androgen. So that means what? We completed what is known as spermatogenesis process. Now we are going to start with the next part, which is known as oogenesis, the process of formation of ovum or a mature female gamete is known as oogenesis, and all of you know when it starts in fetal stage, it undergoes arresting, again in puberty, it reinitiates the process until a sperm is going to fertilize this particular ovum. The process of oogenesis never gets completed. Now, as you see, step by step, let us go into the points. Oogenesis is initiated during embryonic developmental stage when couple of how much million gamete mother cell called oogonia are formed within each fetal ovary. Clear? Next, no more oogonias are added or formed after birth. Next, these cells start division and enter into, please note this is your question which can appear in your exam, which says prophase 1 of the meiotic division and undergoes temporary arresting, and it is called primary oocyte. So the question will be, at which stage is the ovum arrested or oocyte getting arrested? You will say prophase 1 of meiotic division, it is arrested. Now followed with that, each primary oocyte then gets surrounded. I have highlighted a letter A layer of granulosa cell. If one layer of granulosa cell is present, only then you shall be using a term which is called as what? Primary follicle. So this detailing is very important when you study your competitive exams. So I want you to remember a single layer of granulosa cell, you shall be using the word which is known as primary follicle. A large number of these follicles generated during this particular phase from birth to that of puberty. Next he says, therefore at puberty, starting I told million gamete mother cell. But here I am coming to the conclusion, at the stage of puberty, what is the number? Your number is going to be 60,000 to 80,000 primary follicles. What is the meaning of primary follicle? The cell surrounded with single layer of granulosa cell. What is the function of the granulosa cell? To produce a sex hormone which is called as estrogen. Make a note of it. So as more layers are added, what will happen to the amount of estrogen being produced? It is going to increase. Obviously, estrogen is the one which maintains secondary sexual characteristic in female body. So make sure you remember the numbers are left in each ovary. Next, let us go step by step. Please follow the content. Afterwards, we shall re-revise the whole topic. Primary follicles later get surrounded by what? More granulosa cell and a new theca layer is formed. In your NCERT, this sentence is present. So I am talking about covering theca externa, theca interna. So when you talk about the letter theca, then you will be using a word, what? Secondary follicle. This can be a question. When do you call the follicle a secondary follicle? Then remember to mention the word which is called as theca there. Next, if you check this particular image, here I have shown what is called as primordial follicles, and if you observe here, you will be coming across each layer becoming big, and as you see the cells here, cluster of granulosa cells are becoming more. Okay, now the secondary follicle transforms into tertiary follicle. When will I call it as tertiary follicle? When I come across a space which is known as what? Antrim. That antrim will be filled with a fluid called as liquor folliculi. The theca layer forms an inner theca interna and outer theca externa. So we shall revise. primary follicle a single layer. Next, if there is theca, then it is called secondary follicle. If you come across a word which is known as antrim, then you use a word tertiary follicle. Okay. Now followed with that, when you check the other stages, please observe the primary oocyte. See the word, we are using the word primary oocyte in the tertiary follicle grows and undergoes the first unequal meiotic division to form a large secondary oocyte with haploid number of chromosomes and a first tiny polar body. So secondary oocyte retains the nutrient rich cytoplasm of the primary oocyte, whereas the polar body does not get sufficient amount of cytoplasm. So what happens to it? It just gets disintegrated. Okay, so please observe the content. You can clearly see what is happening here. Now, if you study the process of oogenesis, what are the different stages has been mentioned here. So let us just go through the whole content. Oogonia. What is oogonia here? Diploid. With how many chromosomes? 46 chromosomes. Mitotic differentiation occurred in fetal stage. Primary oocyte with stage 2n grows in size. First meiotic division prior to ovulation. Primary oocyte, first polar body, second meiotic division. What is mentioned here? During fertilization, only if the sperm is going to penetrate, oogenesis gets completed, or else it does not. Okay, that's when the second polar body is being released. So this is an image from your NCERT. Recheck the whole content. Check what he says. Oogonia multiplied by mitotic division, primary oocyte, fetal stage, the number of chromosome is said to be 46, birth, childhood, puberty, first meiotic division, ovulation occurs. Now when ovulation occurs, please observe the word secondary oocyte, first polar body. Secondary oocyte should be fertilized by a sperm in order to complete the process of oogenesis. If a sperm is not going to penetrate, oogenesis never gets completed. And this particular image is very important because they will ask you what are the different layers of the ovum when compared to that of the sperm, or they may ask you write the labeling inside to out or out to inside. So if you check the outermost layer when the ovum is released during the process of ovulation, that is exactly on 14th day of a 28th day menstrual cycle, the first layer is called corona radiata. Second layer is known as zona pellucida, which is the one which is going to check whether the sperm belongs to the same species or not. That is compatibility check. If compatibility check occurs, there is a cone of reception formed, which is going to invite the sperm to enter in. Followed with that, you will be coming across plasma membrane. Don't forget there is some space called as perivitaline space also. We'll speak about it quite later. Obviously, the nucleus which is going to be present is said to be haploid, and the cytoplasm is also called as ooplasm. With this, let's move on to the differentiation of spermatogenesis and oogenesis. Formation of sperm, formation of ova. Occurs in the testis, occurs in the ovary. Limited growth phase, elaborated growth phase. At each primary spermatocyte gave rise to 4 sperms. Each primary oocyte gave rise to 1 functional ovum. No polar bodies are formed. Polar bodies are formed. Begins at which stage? Puberty, and extends up to when? Till the death of the person, but we can say reproductive climatrix occurs at the age of 60. Maybe the count of the sperm slightly declines, but production of sperm continues in case of male, but it is going to stop in case of female. Okay, begins at embryonic stage and suspends up to puberty at menarche, and it ceases around the age of 50, where we use a word which is known as menopause. So I hope we glanced through this particular gametogenesis process. Now with this, let's see what is next. One of the important concepts which is known as menstrual cycle. So now let us understand what is called as menstrual cycle. One of the unique characteristics which is seen with respect to that of primates. So let us understand. the reproductive cycle in female primates. When I taught you sexual reproduction in flowering plants, I did talk about lemur, and I also gave an example of the movie Madagascar and the character there, King Juliet. It is also a primate, so don't forget, in your textbook he may not be including lemur in this chapter, but he has given that particular word in the previous chapter. Monkeys, ape, human beings follow a cycle which is known as menstrual cycle. Next, the first menstruation begins at what? Puberty, and the starting of it is called as menarche. Next, in human females, menstruation is repeated at an average interval of how many days? 28 to 29 days of, and the cycle even starting from one menstruation till the next one, we call that particular cycle as menstrual cycle. So now we are going to study menstrual cycle. I hope that you have the picture along with you, because you will definitely have a question every year appearing from this part. So I'm going to explain you the sequence of hormone, how these hormones come into play. So with this, let us start the topic. Okay, let us just finish off one more point. How many ovaries are released? One ovum is released during ovulation in the middle of each menstrual cycle, that is on the 14th day of this particular cycle. Now with this, we are going to study this particular chart. Go ahead, first take off the screenshot, because before I tend to cover the topic, I will scribble it. So please take a screenshot, then we can start with the explanation part. I hope it's clear. Now with this, we are going to start. I shall explain this, then I'll explain the role of hormones. Now please observe, this particular region is the uterine wall. And in the initial stage, the wall is broken, and we call this particular phase as menses, where it is initiated for the first 1 to 5 days. Okay. Now during this particular breakdown, there is very low amount of progesterone. Please check this violet color line here. It is said to be less. So, name the hormone which initiates menstrual cycle is one of the important question. You will say progesterone decline initiates the process of menstrual cycle. Did you understand? So decline in which hormone initiated menstrual cycle? Progesterone hormone. So there is shedding up. Now if the wall is going to shed up, for the next month the wall has to be rebuilt. If the wall has to be rebuilt, we require estrogen also. We also require what is called as progesterone. For estrogen to be released, we want granulocyte cells to produce more estrogen. Now let us understand how that comes into play. Now I am going to anterior pituitary hormone, highlighting the graph which is in green color. This green color graph is nothing but FSH. This FSH went to the cortex part of the ovary to bring about growth of this particular follicular cell. Now as you see here, can you see the follicular cells are growing? Now when I say the follicular cells are growing, I also require one more hormone which is in blue in color, that is said to be LH. Has the cells started to grow, the granulosa cells increased. If granulosa cell increases, I am telling again, the granulosa cell increases. I am just showing you down here. Do you see the word which is called as estroidal? The hormone estrogen increase. If the hormone estrogen is increasing, what is happening to the endometrium wall? It is becoming thick. Has the level of estrogen increased in female blood? Okay. Has the level of estrogen increased in female blood? I'm going back to a hormone which is called as LH. What happened to the LH? Increases. That is called as LH surge, where the Graafian follicle is going to rupture and release this particular egg. So please understand, the fully developed follicle is called as Graafian follicle. To bring about increase in LH, estrogen level increased. As the estrogen level increased, ovulation occurred exactly on which day? 14th day. After that, the ruptured Graafian follicle transformed into an yellow colored structure which is known as corpus luteum, and the corpus luteum now started to produce which hormone? Come down here, you can see there is increase in what? Progesterone hormone. Has the progesterone hormone started to increase, what happened to the wall of the endometrium? It becomes vascularized and also thick, making it ready. If a sperm comes and fertilizes the ova, there will be a process which is called as implantation, and the wall has to be retained for the next 280 days if there is fertilization. But let us say there is no fertilization taking place, then what happened to this particular corpus luteum? It shrinks in size, loses its color, then it is called as corpus albicans. When it is going to shrink in size, obviously the level of which hormone declines here? Progesterone. As soon as the level of progesterone declines, it is going to bring about menstruation. But make a note. When I use the word corpus luteum, I highlighted the term which is called as progesterone. Please don't forget, even estrogen is being secreted by this particular corpus luteum, but progesterone gets the higher hand. So I hope that you have understood the content. If yes, then you will be definitely able to follow this particular chart, evens along with different types of hormone, when the hormone is high, when the hormone is said to be low. Now check out. Uterus line breaks. 1 to 4 days I have given. Please stick on to NCRT. See the number which is present below this particular image. Eggs start to mature. See the hormone FSH. Spermatogenesis also I mentioned FSH. Here also I am mentioning FSH. Next it says uterine builds up due to which hormone? Estrogen. So FSH is high, estrogen is also high. Egg is released during which? LH hormone. So LH is also high. Estrogen was the one which brought about increase in LH. Please don't forget, that's why I'm indicating that particular hormone. Next, uterine lining is maintained because of which hormone? Answer is progesterone. So thereby I'm saying progesterone is said to be high. Fertilization may occur. Definitely progesterone should be high. If progesterone level is going to go low, that means corpus albicans stage came. Then what happened to the level of progesterone? It becomes low. Due to progesterone, there is low progesterone, breakdown of endometrium wall. I hope you have understood. If you want to take this image along with the marking now, go ahead, take a screenshot, then I'll take you to the next part of the topic. Done? Did you all understand the concept so far? If yes, let's move on to the next part. In human beings, menstrual cycle ceases about 50 years of age. That is termed as menopause. It has its own disadvantage. You know that after menopause there is changes, there is certain depression, hot flashes, all that is going to occur because female sex hormone is going to be highly declining. Cycle menstruation is an indicator of a normal reproductive phase which extends between menarche and menopause. So I hope you understood what is called cyclic menstruation. So if you have understood that, we are stepping into the next topic, which is called as fertilization. Okay, let's start with a term which is known as fertilization. When a haploid sperm fuses with a haploid ova to produce a diploid zygote is known as fertilization. So the first step in which insemination takes place, in which the sperm is released into the female reproductive tract, where the sperm has to travel all the way towards the region where the ova is present. This particular egg is bringing about attraction, or the gametes undergo attraction, which we call it as chemotaxis, due to the presence of proteins which is called as glycoprotein. For example, please make a note of it because I have not mentioned in the slide, that is zona pellucida produces what is known as fertilizin and the sperm produces anti-fertilizin. So attraction between fertilizin and anti-fertilizin is considered to be chemotaxis. So that means the sperms, millions of sperm, moving towards the female reproductive tract, entering towards the fallopian tube where the egg is waiting in the fallopian tube, and the fertilization is going to occur in which region? Ampulla isthmus region. So we have highlighted the word ampulla, the site of fertilization. Then followed with respect to there is zygote formation. Once the zygote is being formed, I hope you do understand that it undergoes cleavage, and this cleavage starts after 30 hours of this particular process of fertilization. I have randomly given this particular image to understand certain steps. So in this point, you can see the sperm moving towards a cell, the outermost zone, which is known as corona radiata. Only at the point of contact, the sperm is going to bring about digestion of corona radiata cell. Then it goes to the next region, which is known as the zona pellucida, where compatibility check occurs. Once compatibility is confirmed, the sperm is going to penetrate in. Have a look into your NCERT textbook where you can see sperm head, neck and middle piece has entered into the ovum, only the tail part is left behind, because this sentence appeared in one of your paper. So make sure you observe the diagram properly. Okay. Then the process of fertilization is completed and you will get to see the polar body, which is going to be released out, indicating that oogenesis of the female is getting completed here. Anyway, we shall study it step by step now. So with this, let us start. Fertilization happens only if what? Ovum and the sperm are transported simultaneously. Now recollect the point. The release of ovum is known as ovulation on 14th day. Viability is said to be 24 hours and the sperm has to be released at the same phase of time, even though there is 48 hours of viability of the sperm. So, all what copulation do not lead to fertilization and pregnancy. Why? We are speaking about a time phase which is called as viability. Second, a sperm contacts with zona pellucida, but before that, it should be digesting the cell, which is known as corona radiata, only at the point of contact. The changes in the membrane that blocks the entry of additional sperm. So now make a note. Which is that particular membrane which makes sure monospermy and avoids polyspermy? Only one sperm can penetrate. That particular function is taken care by zona pellucida. Next, secretion of acrosome helps the sperm to enter the egg cytoplasm via zona pellucida and plasma membrane. This causes what? Second meiotic division of secondary oocyte to form an ovum, ooted, and a second polar body. I am marking this third point important because the same sentence had appeared in your competitive paper. So when does the second polar body is released? Only after the sperm entering in. Okay. Next, the haploid nuclei of the sperm and the ovum fuses together to form what is called as diploid zygote. Okay. Once the zygote is formed, we say that meiotic division started, which we call it as cleavage. Now, when we tend to draw this particular zygote and we say meiotic division is taking place, one cell becomes two cell becomes four cell becomes 8 cell, then 16 cell, we go on. But did I change the size of a cell? No. So the amount of cytoplasm remains the same. So please remember, zygote stage, morula stage, you will have the same size itself. So check what he is given. Zygote undergoes meiotic division, which is called as cleavage, as it moves through the isthmus towards the uterus and forms 2, 4, 8, 16 daughter cell called what? Blastomeres. And he uses the word moves. This particular movement is brought about by whom? The hair-like structure, which is called as cilia, which is moving back and forth, pushing this particular cell to move towards the region of the uterus so that it can bring about a process called implantation. So I told the flagella movement means it is circular. If it is cilia movement, it is going to be back and forth. Don't forget all these points. The embryo with 8 to 16 blastomere is known as what? Morula. It looks like a berry, so it is called as morula, and I'm also marking this point as important. This question has already come. Next, followed with this, morula continues to divide and transforms into blastocyst. In case of us, that is humans, we use a word blastocyst. When do you call it as blastocyst? When you are able to see blastocele cavity. Blastocyst, blastomeres are arranged into trophoblast, outer layer, and inner mass attached to the trophoblast. Now, at this particular stage, may I say implantation is going to occur? So, trophoblast layer gets attached to endometrium and the inner mass cell gets differentiated into embryo. So, I hope you have followed all these particular steps. And if you have followed, let us complete it off. After attachment to the uterine cells divides rapidly. It's like a protective capsule which is going to cover that particular blastocyst which got implanted and covers the blastocyst. Thus, the blastocyst becomes embedded into the endometrium. This process is called as implantation. Starting with this, we say pregnancy phase. Okay. Next, the inner mass cell gets differentiated into the 3 germ layers. The outer ectoderm, middle mesoderm, and inner endoderm. These 3 layer structure, gastrula, forms the embryo. So these are the 3 steps. But let us re-revise the whole content. Observe. Now, as the sperm came, which is the first layer the sperm is going to digest by releasing the lytic enzyme. What do you see here? Corona radiata cell. Once it reaches, the next region comes. The next region is nothing but zona pellucida. What did zona pellucida make sure? I should be avoiding polyspermy, encouraging only one sperm to penetrate inside. So only one sperm enters and we call it as acrosomal reaction. If you further study the same topic, you will be coming across cortical reaction during which the calcium ion, which is happening inside the ooplasm, generates a wave of this particular calcium structure and it brings about formation of what is known as fertilization membrane. So here compatibility check is done and the sperm is entering in. Has the sperm entered in? Please check out the nucleus. Fusion takes place and don't forget we completed the process which is called as oogenesis, followed with the formation of what is called as zygote. If a zygote is formed, let us understand step by step in this diagram. Ovulation occurred. After ovulation only, sperm has to come and bring about the process of fertilization. Once the sperm brings about fertilization, remember the place at which the fertilization occurs in the fallopian tube is called as ampulla. So make sure you remember the word ampulla because that will be the widest part of the fallopian tube where fertilization can occur. After which cleavage started. When the cleavage started, the amount of cytoplasm remains the same, only the cell number increases. Nuclear material also increases. As the cells are multiplying by a process called as cleavage, the cells are pushed all the way down and this is by the action of cilias. And finally, it comes to what is called as the isthmus junction, enters into the womb. Please observe the diagram. Now the stage is called as blastocyst and you can clearly see the inner mass of cell. This inner mass of cell is faced towards the uterine wall which is known as endometrium and the trophoblast is going to bring about attachment to the uterine wall which is called as implantation. And we know that implantation takes place after 7 days of fertilization, 7th day. Between, we can also say 7th to 9 days it can take place, but very precisely if you have to talk with respect to NCERT, go ahead, say 7th day implantation takes place. I hope that you have followed with the content so far. If implantation occurs, please do remember there is production of finger-like projection. That finger-like projection, what you come across is known as chorionic villi and the uterine tissue gets interdigitated. Now, what do you understand by the word interdigitated? They become interdigitated. So, this becomes the connection between the mother and the fetus right now. So, interdigitated and forms what? The placenta. It is the structural and functional unit between whom? Embryo and the fetus and the embryo, the fetus and the maternal body. If that is happened, placenta is connected to embryo by what? This will be the word umbilical cord. Make sure you mark it important. The question can arise. It transports substances to and from the embryo. So what substances does it transport? You can say exchange of gaseous substance, exchange of nutrients, exchange of unwanted waste material which is produced during the metabolism inside the fetus has to be thrown out to that of the mother's body. All this exchange takes place. But please do remember, we do study a topic which is called as human health and disease. In human health and disease, he clearly says that if a mother body develops any kind of infection, in order to protect the fetus, mother body produces an antibody which is said to be IgG, which passes through the placenta. So I am talking about natural passive immunity. Okay, I used a word natural passive immunity. Name the antibody which can pass through the placenta and enter the baby. You will say IgG. Clear? And please do understand, the sex hormones of the mother body cannot be entering into the fetus because there is a barrier for it. Now with this, if you check, gestation period, how many days? That is said to be 280 days. That is the time required for the complete development of the human baby inside the mother's womb. Now, followed with that, the placenta, as we all know, it is said to be the structural and functional unit between the developing embryo and the maternal body. Please understand that this particular, attachment which is going to be present takes care of the baby by giving all whatever is necessary, takes away all unnecessary things. But one of the important point that where we tend to lose marks, hormones. I want you to understand the hormonal play of the placenta really well. But before that, just have a look at this particular image. It has too many terms. Just look into the term what we have studied with respect to NCERT part itself. So you can see what is called as umbilical cord here. You will also come across a sac which is called as amniotic sac, in which the baby is present. You know that there is presence of chorion, amniotic fluid bag. You also came across embryo sac. Please remember, not embryo sac, sorry, yolk sac. Yolk is not present, sac is required because the first RBC is produced in yolk sac. Please don't say, oh, it is produced in bone marrow. Bone only is not developed. From where do you think the blood cells will come? So yolk sac is present for us for the first production of RBC. So your RBC is first time produced within the yolk sac. Okay. After that, liver will come into play. Liver will start producing. Spleen will come into play. Then only your bones will play an important role. Okay. Now, let us study the hormones of placenta. Placenta also acts as an endocrine tissue and produces several hormones called human chorionic gonadotropin HCG. This is the hormone which is being tested by taking the urine sample. If HCG is present, the female is considered to be pregnant. And one of the common question, HCG is necessary to maintain which hormone? They will say LH. Why LH? LH is required for maintaining what is called corpus luteum. Why corpus luteum? Progesterone. Did you make a note of it? I started with HCG, then I linked it to LH to that of corpus luteum. Corpus luteum produces progesterone. So the play of hormone comes there. So make sure you made a note of what I told. Human placental, lactogen, estrogen and progesterone, etc. But look into the next sentence of your NCERT. Later phase of pregnancy, hormone called as relaxin, which brings about relaxation of the uterine wall, plays an important role, is also secreted by whom? So ovary secretes relaxin. Let us remember that HCG, HPL and relaxin are produced only during pregnancy. I'm marking this. Very important. I see many of the students making a mistake, especially when hormonal play comes with placenta. Make a note of it. Next, followed with that, in addition, during pregnancy, other hormones such as estrogen, progesterone, now see the word, cortisol, stress hormone, thyroxine, etc. are increased to several folds in whose blood? In the mother's blood. Assertion, reasoning questions will come. See, it's not like just reading your NCERT, understanding the sentence. Tomorrow, if you are a doctor, okay, memory part of it should be really good. if memory part of you should be really good, you need to understand the concept. You cannot by-heart things in biology. Okay? Now, with this, what are the major features of embryonic development at various months of pregnancy? Any question can come. Every time we ask you the question, just check out. 0, 1, that is first 1 month. Heart, next second month. Limbs, digits. 12th week, first trimester. Limbs, external genital organs are well developed. Then you come to 5th month. One of the most common question has come from this point, that is first movement of the fetus, appearance of hair on the head. Then 24 weeks, second trimester, body is covered with fine hairs, eyelids separate, eyelashes are formed. Then comes 9 months, the baby is now ready to delivery. So we will be studying what? Parturition. But before going to the concept of parturition, just we will have an overlook of what concept we have studied. Ovum underwent ovulation and the sperm is released. See the word, there's a word which is called as capacitation. Those who are going to write NEET exam, please remember that capacitation is activation of the sperm. The question will be where it will occur. Female reproductive tract. Right? Why is it? Decapacitation factors are present in male body. So capacitation can occur only in female body. So capacitation has to occur in female body. So after the process of fertilization, there is formation of diploid zygote and that undergoes cleavage, which is called as mitotic division. So from that stage, we will use a word embryogenesis is going to happen. So you come across blastulation, then you get to know there is implantation taking place. Then 3 germ layers are formed, which is called as gastrulation. From the 3 germ layers, organs are formed, which is known as organogenesis. And finally, the growth of the fetus is going to occur. So this is a simple way to remember what happened after the process of fertilization, which is a sequence of order is what we are looking for here. Now, forward with that, parturition. What is parturition? Process of giving birth to young ones is called as parturition. So parturition is what? How it is induced? It is neuroendocrine mechanism. So nervous system and the hormones, that is endocrine hormones, plays an important role. The signals of parturition, so many times we have asked you this particular question. Signals of parturition originates from whom? Fully developed fetus and the placenta inducing uterine contraction, fetal ejection reflex. This causes the release of oxytocin from where? From maternal pituitary. From where we are releasing it? Maternal pituitary. Baby does not. So thereby oxytocin causes stronger uterine contraction, that is the muscles, which in turn stimulates further secretion of oxytocin. And I'm now saying more and more oxytocin is produced. So I am talking about release of more hormones. Such a feedback mechanism is called as positive feedback. Usually when hormone becomes more, for example, if FSH becomes more, either you take Sertoli cell in case of male body, inhibin is produced to reduce the FSH, negative feedback. In case of female, the ovary produces inhibin to suppress the FSH. But for the first time, we are talking about produce more oxytocin. Such a kind of feedback is called as positive feedback. So they can ask you a question, where does positive feedback is seen? Production of milk and parturition, positive feedback occurs with respect to a hormone which is known as oxytocin, because oxytocin is the one which is going to act on smooth muscle to bring about here contraction. In case of milk production, that is contraction of mammary glands to bring about ejection of milk. Okay, so expulsion of the baby out of the uterus through the birth canal. Now if you observe the flow chart here, please check. And starting with hypothalamus, because hypothalamus is the one which produces oxytocin, because posterior pituitary can only store the hormone. So oxytocin is released from posterior pituitary. How? More the contraction, oxytocin is going to be released. Positive feedback, I already told you. Oxytocin reaches the uterus and acts on uterine muscle. Now, if you check this term here, PGS, if you ask me what is it, it is prostaglandins. A prostaglandin is a chemical, not hormone, because it just being absorbed by your smooth muscle. It is produced in male as well as in female. It brings about contraction of smooth muscles. Okay, so that is also being released. So altogether, prostaglandins and oxytocin causes uterine to undergo contraction, during which the baby is pressed against the cervix. The head of the baby is being faced first, and cervical dilation occurs, passage of the baby into the vagina, then there is expulsion of baby outside. So I hope you have understood. Whenever we say contraction, there should be relaxation. When there is relaxation, you need to speak about a hormone which is called as relaxin. Now, if yes, check out the last part. After parturition, the umbilical cord has to be cut off. The placenta and the remnants of the umbilical cord is expelled from the maternal body after parturition. It is called afterbirth. Followed with that, lactation. Lactation cannot start immediately. It may take some time also. But if you are speaking about lactation, please remember this point. Progesterone level should decline. If progesterone level declines, obviously the endometrium wall starts to shed. Due to decline of progesterone hormone, prolactin comes into play. Okay. And once the baby starts stimulating the mammary gland, production of milk much more increases. So I'm talking about a feedback which is called as positive feedback. Now check out what is this particular image indicating. It is talking about positive feedback. You are actually seeing a baby sipping onto the mammary gland, which says prolactin is required for production of milk. But if the milk has to be ejected out, it is because of a hormone which is called as oxytocin. And please don't forget that oxytocin not only brings about contraction of smooth muscle, it is a hormone which develops a good bonding between individuals. Okay, it is also called as love hormone. Okay, so now mammary glands produces milk at the end of what? Pregnancy. It is called as what? Lactation. And what is the point that we have to remember? The initial milk which is being produced after parturition, which is thin yellowish in color, more protein, less fat, and it does contain an antibody which is said to be IgA. Please remember, this is also one of the part of natural passive immunity, because the mother's body brought about production of antibody molecule here. So if your body does not produce antibody and someone else produces it, it is passive. If it is taking place naturally, then I will call it as natural passive. But if it is going to be injected, I'm talking about antibody being injected into your system, it becomes what is called as artificial passive immunity. So now, the yellowish milk produced during the initial few days of lactation is called as colostrum, which contains several antibodies essential for the development of resistance of newborn babies. And I hope that we did a very quick revision of this particular topic, as these topics are still present in your head because you recently finished your second PUC examination. So we did a quick revision. That means we have come to an end of this particular topic. Then in the next class, I will be discussing the discussion questions. But before I start discussing it, it is your duty to solve all the questions, keep it ready in the class so that when we come back, we will check how many questions have been marked right, so that you can restart your revision if you find mistake. So with this, I'm going to wind up today's session. Meet you all in the next class. Make sure you keep practicing more number of MCQ question. Take care of yourself and the people around you. Meet you all in the next upcoming class. See you all.